Cruisers are iconic. In fact, if you were to tell the average person to close their eyes and imagine a motorcycle, they're not going to be thinking about a Husqvarna Vitpillen. They're not going to be thinking about a Yamaha R7, and they're definitely not going to be thinking about a KLR 650. Because let's face it, even Kawasaki doesn't think about the KLR 650. When you ask an average person what they think of when they think of a motorcycle, they're going to think of something with a low seat height, a teardrop tank, and a clamshell riding position. Yet, despite how popular and iconic they've become over the past few decades, they're really not good at much. Out of the box, they're not very fast. They are definitely not light. These are some husky boys. And they are even less agile than the average hoss who rides them. So it would lead many people, myself included, who grew up idolizing sport bikes ever since I was a wee little lad playing the Road Rash video games, to wonder, why does Big Hoss want to hop on this hog, crank it down the highway, snort some grass clip-ins, and then yell at some sport bike rider who passed him 3 lanes over? What's the point? What is the point of a cruiser motorcycle? And well, after about 2 years of owning this Triumph Bonneville Bobber, I can finally say that I think I figured it out. Cruisers are the purest form of motorcycling. And there's no better way for me to explain what I mean by that without taking you along for a ride. But first, howdy all crankers, my name is Jeff, you are watching TrashWerks, and today we're going to be talking about what the point of all these hogs on the road are. So I think the best way to explain how cruisers are the most purest form of motorcycling is to look at their history. And like most American icons, cruisers find their origin in World War II. So before World War II, motorcycles weren't really a commonplace thing. They were really just basically toys for rich people. But during World War II, the United States military had a need for a small, agile, relatively quick machine. And a little manufacturer known as Harley Davidson stepped up and delivered tons and tons of motorbikes to the United States military for the war effort. And consequently, tons of soldiers rode these bikes throughout the war. And what they found is that they are actually quite capable machines, but more importantly, they're actually pretty fun. And so when the war was won and these veterans shipped back home, well, now the U.S. military had an excess of motorcycles that they really didn't have a need for. And so a lot of these bikes found their way back into the hands of these veterans that rode them. But something else that the veterans found once they came back home was a very different life. You have to remember, a lot of these veterans spent their teenage and early 20s in war-torn Europe, and a lot of times coming back home without the friends that they made there, just to find 1950s suburban America. And so a lot of these veterans went from front lines and mess halls to the rat race and suburban sprawl. And it was a bit of a shock for them. And so one of the things they did as an outlet was organize together and go out on rides on the bikes that they brought back from the war. And this is where the iconic motorcycle gang originated from. It was actually usually just a group of veterans who would get together to escape the monotony and, quite frankly, soul-crushing existence that is suburban America. Basically, they wanted freedom. Now, of course, having this group of young men who have experienced pretty messed up things will usually lead them to get a little bit rowdy. And so accounts of these motorcycle groups, these motorcycle gangs, causing a ruckus and raising HE double hockey sticks started to become popularized in media, specifically film, which had really become more prevalent at that time. And eventually, you started seeing motorcycles, specifically cruisers, depicted as counterculture, as rebels, whether they are a rowdy group of youths or just a couple of buds hitting that fond of freedom, riding across the U.S., taking the scenic route across the country. And this image stuck with cruisers. And so manufacturers followed this image. The allure of cruisers wasn't to win races. It wasn't to have something that was more fuel efficient during the oil crisis. No, the allure of cruisers was to ride, and that's the ethos that has stuck with them. They were never really designed to be particularly good at anything. They're not agile, they're not particularly fast, and they're definitely not lightweight. And so the point of cruisers is never to focus on how you can ride them, but rather the ride itself. The reward is the ride. Now, to a lot of people, myself included, the idea of getting a motorcycle just to ride didn't seem that alluring. And so I, like many others, decided to go the route of sport bikes. I decided to focus on sporty riding, and I enjoy it. I love sport bikes. I love riding sport bikes. I love riding naked bikes. I ride them on the street. I ride them on the track. And I really didn't get why Big Hoss would be so die-hard about cranking his hog until I got this Triumph Bonneville Bobber. Now, the only reason I got this bike was because we already had a Ninja 400 and a Z900, a sport bike and a naked bike, so we wanted to get something different. And quite frankly, like with every other cruiser, this thing is kind of a vibe. And so we got it. And so me, who had spent a ton of time on a 900cc sport bike, found that it was slow, found that it was sluggish, and found that it was sort of boring to ride. But admittedly, it was still pretty cool, so I stuck it out. But as I started to develop my sport riding skills, I started to fall down a rabbit hole. And this is where cruisers really shine through. The main reason that I recommend every rider has a cruiser in their garage, especially as a secondary bike, is because it helps ground your experience. If we look at sport riding, or if we look at trail riding, it's always about doing more, about raising the bar. For example, with sport riding, it's always about going faster. So when I first started riding, of course, I wanted to go quicker, so after a while I got a faster bike. And then I wanted that bike to go quicker, so I got an exhaust, I got an intake, I got a tune. And then I needed a way to get that power to the ground, so I got better tires. And then I needed a way to stop better, so I upgraded the brakes. And then I had one too many pucker moments and realized I should maybe take this riding off the street and go to the track. Well, now I have to find a track day. I have to get my bike to the track. I have to get my bike ready for the track. I have to get a track setup. You know, what am I going to do in the pits? And it's just this spiral that you find yourself in. And then when you get that bike and you bring it back from the track and ride on the street, well, now it feels boring. It feels dull, bland, and it just doesn't feel fun because you can't push it like you want to. But the beauty of cruisers is that you can't push them. There's no point. You want something that is more agile? Well, get something that sits taller and is lighter. The easiest way to push a cruiser, 9 times out of 10, is just to get a better bike. And once you come to that realization, well, it shifts your perspective. You start focusing more on the ride itself rather than how you're riding the bike. And it is freeing. It is freeing to slow down. In a world where everything is pushing you to go further and further, it's nice to slow down every now and then. It's nice to have something that you can find fulfillment in without pushing. And now when I ride my other bikes, they feel that much more exciting. They feel faster, they feel more agile. It's more fulfilling to ride those bikes. It's more exhilarating to ride those bikes because I have a benchmark to compare it against. And sure, while I'm out riding on this thing, I might see a spirited sport rider and feel like I'm missing out a little bit, but I very quickly remember that when I'm on this bike, I'm just chilling. I'm just a chill dude. And so I've learned to not really focus on trying to make this bike excel at anything really in particular. It's not a great touring bike. It's not a great sport bike. It's definitely not a great off-road bike. There will always be a better bike, purpose-built for whatever kind of riding I'm trying to do, that will outperform this bike every single time. And so the point of cruisers, the best part about them, is that they will bring you your motorcycling ego death. They will teach you to enjoy the ride. But that about wraps it up for me. Of course, if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more content like this, please remember to like the video and subscribe. We recently just hit 2,000 subscribers and I'm very happy about that. Thank you all so much. If you have any comments or questions for me, drop those down below. I do my best to keep up with them, although a lot of them admittedly are pure sewage. If you want to follow me on other platforms, I am on Instagram at trash.works. I am also on TikTok at TrashWerks. But with that, I will see you all in the next one.